Have you ever met someone who just gives great hugs? What about someone who gives amazing shoulder rubs or is an A-plus cuddler? My next guest makes cuddling her business, literally. She's the founder of the Cuddle Sanctuary, the Los Angeles destination for touch-positive events and professional cuddling since 2014. No, I'm not kidding. She's shared her snuggle know-how on shows like Keeping Up with the Kardashians and The Bachelorette. Today, she's going to tell us what a professional cuddler does and doesn't do and share why we should have more touch in our lives. Culture shifter, cuddle queen, not drama queen, hug homegirl, Jean Franzblau. Thanks for coming to the show.
So nice to spend this time with you.
So I am curious, Miss Cuddle Queen Jean, what inspired you to start the Cuddle Sanctuary?
I was doing a lot of traveling and feeling lonely on the regular. I was a road warrior. And one time I was looking through an in-flight magazine and saw grown-ups in pajamas laying around, smiling and snuggling with each other. And it awoke a yearning in me, this idea of people being sweet with each other in this unique way that was so sweet. Like just there was a lot of kindness and silliness and playfulness in it. And at the time, there was nothing like that that I could find in the Los Angeles area. And so I just kept longing and wondering and waiting for something. And eventually I found a meetup group. It was a sex positive meetup group called Sex Positive Los Angeles. That was an aspect of my life I wanted to explore further and find more community in. And their orientation had a cuddle aspect to it. And I was like, wait a minute, somebody's going to guide this. This is really happening. Like I was psyched. I was psyched. And it was structured in a way that was really simple and yet clear. And I found myself that evening spooning with somebody in front of me and somebody behind me. And let me tell you, those conversations were not small talk. It was what I would call big talk or deep talk. It was these people I just met. We were sharing at such depth. I felt blissed out. I had no idea about the science, about why I felt blissed out, what chemicals in my brain were flooded by the soothing touch. But I remember not caring what time it was when I left. And I'm usually such a very precise person, so I was just like high on the cuddle chemical, slept deeply that night and woke up. And I just remember I was like, life is good. I feel connected. I feel part of community. I woke up alone, but I just felt connected and well. There was a wellness that I hadn't had in my life at the time. And I was quite hooked. I had a corporate background in training, communication skills, stuff like that. So I knew that I could reverse engineer that I could organize something like that myself. And so I volunteered right away and started putting together my own events. And then as you mentioned, I've been doing this since 2014. So I began testing and trying and failing and succeeding like a laboratory, like a scientist, to find out the social, what it took to bring strangers together safely to do this type of thing with each other, and got really, really good at it and designed a whole practice and community around it called Cuddle Sanctuary.
That's amazing. I mean, as an introvert, you had me at no small talk and sleep. Like I'm sold already. You know what I mean?
Done and done. Small talk is a bore to me. It's actually exhausting.
Yes.
And not fun. And it's not. I'm not into it. So the idea of being able to quickly move into depth with people was a real calling.
So I think in our culture, we see cuddling as like the dessert of life, of human interaction. It's after sex, it's while you're watching a movie, it's like a treat. But you've implied that it's an important and critical part of the human experience. So, you mentioned the science. What is the science that makes it so critical?
Yeah, well, just to help folks sort of think about it, rather than thinking of cuddling, which some people think of like is an infantile activity or a sexual one, think of it as hugs or holding hands. So simple, soothing human interactions, rather than thinking of it as such this advanced thing, like this weird thing adults are doing.
Right.
So what is it? What is the science behind holding hands, and especially hugs? It's oxytocin, which some scientists do call the hug hormone. Oxytocin is released in mammals. So all the feel-good feelings I might feel, so does a mouse, so does your dog, so does a cat. And horses, etc. And this is what we have evolved to help us to come together. The feel-good hormone helps us to cooperate and coordinate and connect. And frankly, the way I'm imagining it happened is that is how humans evolved to survive. Is that we felt good when we were together, we cooperated, and we were better at hunting, we were better at gathering, we survived as a species because of this evolution of our bodies. So we're built for it.
Huh.
And yet in the past period of time, our brains sometimes humans come up with ideas that are not workable. And separating people into family units rather than larger communities, that's not super workable. Cubicles, separating us from each other, not so workable. A pandemic allows us to understand that when we're separate from each other, we don't do well. So being in physical proximity of other human beings and receiving the wellness benefits of connection is an important aspect of wellness. What does it feel like when we don't eat? Well, we starve to death. Or don't drink, we're thirsty and might even die. When we don't have shelter, we're cold and we could get sick. But when we don't have soothing human touch, we just feel crappy. I want to put a pin in that, or just say, or like a caret in that statement. When I say we, I don't mean everyone. Some of us have had touch trauma where soothing touch actually feels dangerous and gets fear going on in the body. And so please, when I say we, I mean many of us, but possibly not everyone listening. But I'll stop there because that was a lot. Yeah.
No, that was really great. I think that's the most positive version of tribal behavior I've ever heard. And it makes so much sense. And I'm glad that you mentioned COVID as well, because since the pandemic, we're told to keep our distance. And so I feel like cuddling is like this double-edged sword of, we want to, be safe and not potentially make other people sick. But also, I thought I remembered hearing that oxytocin, or maybe some other combined chemical benefits from those touching, from that interaction, creates immune boosting benefits. Is that true?
Yeah.
Have you read that?
That's true. And that is such a paradox, isn't it?
It is.
We get immune boosting when we receive the soothing touch that our bodies are built for, and yet we're supposed to be separate from each other. So how do we navigate that in these weird times? And what I recommend is like having a pod, or building a pod, your pandemic pod, your germacule. These are folks that you have a trusting relationship with, that you can discuss habits. How do I do life? How many people do I interact with? What's my job? Did I choose to be vaccinated? How many people, how do I do my masked and unmasked life, if at all? Am I washing my hands regularly? And that is how cuddle buddies can determine if this is somebody, if this is a safe choice. It's about being not completely risk-free. It's about being risk-aware and balancing risk with wellness, right? And so I even created a class during all of this called Find a COVID-Safe Cuddle Buddy, with a spreadsheet. So people who are into lists can have a conversation about like what do we as a team just consider dangerous behavior that we won't do? And what do we consider fine behavior that we don't even have to tell each other about? Like being masked and food shopping. We don't have to tell each other about that. But the idea of visiting or going on a plane, let's discuss it. Yeah. So it's not easy. This is not easy.
But you're speaking my language. I mean, we've covered no small talk naps, and now you're talking about lists. Like, be still my heart, Jean. Clearly, you are my people. So that's pretty exciting. Now, I love what you talk about, how you mentioned that it's about the communication in your Germacube, I think you said. But also, not everyone has the same touch preferences, and there's also a cultural dynamic. So internationally, do you have any feeling for the touchiest versus the least touchiest cultures?
There was years ago, there was a researcher named Dr. Sidney Gerard who did this study observing people in their native environment at tea or coffee shops, that kind of thing. And the researchers would observe how often people would touch in a 60-minute period of time, country by country. And at the time, like this is what the research revealed, that in England, people touched no times. And in the United States, they touched twice. And if you think about it, I'm in the US, I'm like, yeah, I could see that. Like maybe a hug before, maybe a hug after.
Right.
Your tea.
Perfect.
And then in France, the researchers counted 110 touches.
In an hour?
Yeah. How did they do that? They must have been like,
were they sitting on each other's laps? Like,
right, exactly. That's my question. But, so how do we take that and use that simple hack? Perhaps if you have a friend you're meeting that's in your germicule, you're meeting them for tea, maybe outdoors, to ask them to sit next to you rather than across from you.
I always do that to my husband. He's like, why are you here? But I love it. I love to be close. So I actually have a question about that. So let's get into some of the curious Q&As about cuddling and your Cuddle Sanctuary business. So when I cuddle with my husband, I get the zoomies, like a puppy does, where they get excited and they run around is that a thing? Am I just an oddball?
Wait a minute. So you cuddle with your husband and it like fills you with energy?
It fills me with energy. I become an absolute geek and I just get like the puppy zoomies, or sometimes kids before bedtime, they get the zoomies. I get the zoomies.
That is amazing. And what that sounds like is joy.
Aww.
And it literally sounds like it's a way for you to gain energy. That is amazing and super interesting. What some of us in the cuddle world will say that we feel cuddle baked after spending a few hours cuddling,
okay.
Which is sort of a high. And so many of us say, we feel relaxed, but also like spacey. So much so that many professional cuddlers will say to especially first-time clients, maybe you don't want to get in the car right away.
Really?
Maybe you want to take a walk and sort of get grounded. One client once said that he wandered into a food store not far from where my cuddle cottage is and found himself just wandering the aisles aimlessly. Like he was so blissed out. So it sounds like you get energized. Some folks get very blissed out and just sort of like, well, man, I joke sometimes. I sort of put my arm up and I'm like, it's time to get a date. I joke that it's like, I call it vitamin T, touch.
I love it.
But what's happening, I think, in all the bodies or a lot of the bodies is that oxytocin releases when we're feeling safe and we're getting that like an extended hug or hold hands. People with breasts and with wombs can feel it when they're breastfeeding. People can get a boost of a lot of different hormones, including oxytocin, when they make love.
Mm-hmm.
So these are altered states of consciousness that are, number one, that are natural and healthy versus taking a shot of tequila. So mental health hack.
Yes. And I'm for it. So we've definitely established it's healthy, it's necessary, it's a necessity, not a nicety. So as far as professional cuddlers, tell me about who your clients are. Give me some examples of who typically hires a professional cuddler.
Yeah, so I'm going to speak about my colleagues because right now, I'm not practicing, but my colleagues around the country are there, and I teach folks. So that is how I have so I just want to give you a sense of who are these people. So many categories. One real popular one are those who are not partnered, single, broken up, widowed, in between relationships, not interested in a romantic relationship, and yet they know they're needing this human connection. So that's a real common one, and folks who identify as been culturally called single. Another group are people who are new in town. So we had before the pandemic, we had Airbnb and TripAdvisor events. Like we would have our events posted there, and just have people from around the world come and visit, and just be so grateful to have an oasis of human connection, because travel alone can be lonely. But also, people have just moved in. They haven't yet found their people. They haven't found their clan. And yet they need human connection. I'm especially proud of people who are broken up and decide that it will not be good for them to get their touch needs met by launching themselves into another relationship when they're not ready.
That makes sense. I would never have thought of that.
People are so smart. They know themselves. So many people who come to Cuddle Sanctuary know themselves, that they're like, I know I have this need. I know I have this longing, and I know I'm not ready to be out there. Or, and I want to speak really candidly about my own journey. Back in the day, there wasn't this language around platonic soothing touch amongst people. And so I just thought that the only way to get kindness and affection was if I partnered or hooked up and had some sex so that I can get the cuddling. I assure you, I'm a very sexual person, and sexuality is a wonderful part of the human experience, a sacred part in my estimation. But using it to get to actually what my real needs are can create very confusing moments and problems and trauma between people. And, I wound up hurting my own feelings. I try to latch onto somebody and then get the cuddling, and then, or not. That was like my bottom, really, is I was traveling and lonely and hooked up with somebody. I really went after them. And the truth is, I was feeling quite depressed. It's just not the right headspace to be connecting in that way with somebody new. And, engaged in some sexuality, and then was like, let's spoon. And the person said, I'm not going to do that. That's something I would do with a girlfriend. I got to go. And I was like, oh, ouch.
Yeah. Oh, that's no good.
Ouch. And you might think that this person is a villain, but I hijacked his evening.
Right.
He didn't have the boundaries to say, when I was like, can I join you for dinner? He didn't have the boundaries to say, no, that's not what I want for my evening. And so he was, it was bad.
So would this be something that, I'm thinking about widows and widowers, and I'm thinking about military spouses whose partners are deployed for long periods of time, maybe people healing from trauma. Are any of those examples of clients?
Yes, this is great. So when Cuddle Sanctuary was brand spanking new, in walked Mark, who is a Cuddle ambassador. So it's okay for me to call him by name. And Mark let me know that his spouse had died years before, and he longed for the connection. And even though this was weird to him, he wanted to try it. And he became an avid attendee and shares with people around, wherever he goes, he would talk about cuddling and the wonderful benefits that he got from it. So absolutely, yes. I'm thinking of another widow or as well, where that, similar story. And in terms of folks in the military, I'm not near a military base. So I want to make that point. But folks who have PTSD have come to Cuddle Sanctuary looking for some support and looking to find some solutions to problems that they're finding in their lives as they're trying to navigate non-military life, having felt a lot of trauma. And so they have found us. And with, I would say a cuddle event might be overwhelming for some and might be too far a leap. Instead, working one-on-one with a trauma-informed professional cuddler could be a way to go.
Oh, that's interesting.
Make sure your cuddler is trauma-informed.
Okay. So how when you said it's no small talk, I love that. And then what you just said made me think of counseling. So how do these cuddle sessions not become a counseling session if the cuddler is not a certified mental health therapist?
Great question. So one thing to keep in mind is that there are some therapists who are transitioning away from the rigidity of the certifying bodies of their states to do coaching so that they have the skills, but they're moving away from therapy into a coaching practice where they can also bring the somatic benefits or the body benefits of cuddling, that they're seeing the missing piece in talk therapy.
Okay.
That's one thing. The next is that many cuddlers are certified coaches or have other modalities of skill. Having said all of that, so in other words, there are people who have all kinds of multiple disciplines going. Having said that, how do we not overstep or move into territory that we're not qualified for? Number one is knowing that there are, for every professional cuddler who might be listening, like, I want to do this work, knowing when you are outside of your scope of skills is critical, and referring out. So knowing knowing people in your community that offer services that are, psychotherapy services and others, and being able to refer out without any shame because otherwise we can do harm accidentally. So, and here's like a great practice that we teach in Cuddle Sanctuary training is about listening without advice giving. I think we can do great work if we follow where the client wants to go in terms of what they share, asking good questions, being respectful when the client doesn't want to go in a particular area. So being a skilled, empathetic listener, which many of us have those skills already, and certainly we can build upon them, is a wonderful skill for a professional cuddler. Great boundaries, love of people, skilled listening, and then the discipline not to advice give. That's a challenging one for those of us who like to fix things.
That is. What a good skill to cultivate, though. Okay, I think a big question that everyone is wondering is, how do these sessions not turn into sex?
It's a great question. First of all, the reason it's such a great question is that in our culture here in the US, people have been taught that the only touch that adults can share who aren't related, it's not your kids, right, is sexual touch. So if we're taught to have this really limited sliver of understanding of how adults can share affection, then you're going to think, well, cuddling's before or after sex. So y'all are, it's all underground, it's a wink, wink. It's really not cuddling. Or it evolves into something else. And the truth is our work is platonic from beginning to end. So how do we bridge this? And how do we teach our clients or work with clients who want to learn this platonic practice is talk candidly about it. And so, on the welcome page of Cuddle Sanctuary services, we just mention arousal and how to handle it. Because many people with penises get really worried because they do want to cuddle. They get what the service is, but they're like, well, what if my body responds?
Right. Yeah.
So it's important for professional cuddlers across the gender spectrum to know that a relaxed body, when a person has a penis and their body is relaxed, it simply might be a body response. That has nothing to do with the person's intention. They might have feel some embarrassment about it. And so knowing that is really important. And the other is having really good spidey sense to make sure that the client is not actually seeking a sexual service. So there are little red flags, and I don't think it's dangerous to be looking for sexual services, but we call them red flags in our work because we're looking for clients that are right for the service.
So do you refer people out to sex workers?
I personally do. I consider Cuddle Sanctuary a cousin practice to sex work. Why? We have a lot in common. We're meeting people for maybe an hour. We're meeting in private space. We're doing intimate work. Ours is platonic, so we're not working in genital energy, but it is affectionate and loving, and there's connection and touch. And we need to make sure that that we're making the right choice, that we're safe with our clients. So there's a lot that has in common with sex work. You might have thought that I would be like, no, I would never. Who are those people? Those people they're doing a solid service, and I'm a sex work positive person who feels like it should be legalized intelligently around the world. There are so many people who cannot get access to the relationship skills that it takes to build intimacy, to bring sexuality into their day-to-day lives. And should they therefore just like not be sexual beings?
Right.
Or just, have a very limited sexual scope? It's just, there's a great movie called, I think it's called Sessions or The Sessions, starring Helen Hunt. And it shows a surrogate partner who is somebody who has studied to work with people in teaching them about sexuality and helping them open up their sexuality in a way that's legal in California and in other countries. But she works with somebody who is very, very disabled. I don't know if he's paraplegic, but the point is like people who have disabilities deserve sex lives as well. And again, sometimes the only touch they receive is clinical touch. Very lonely.
Right.
Very lonely. Anyway, a lot to think about, right?
That is a lot to think about. I love how it brings up these thoughts. And I want to talk more about the opportunity for personal development that's kind of baked into all of this. But I want to ask one more question in regards to the business side is, how do you keep the cuddlers and the clients safe? Is there background checks or other sort of screening that's involved to make sure that no one is put into a dangerous position?
Yeah, you make a great point. So background checks, that can be misleading. There are so many people who are incarcerated who don't belong in jail. There's so many situations where people are wrongly accused, or there's just so to have somebody be a felon, like they don't get any cuddling. These are the folks who need the cuddling the most. So what is a background check? But I get your point. How do we stay safe? And the answer is, at least in my practice, is to I have a protocol called Stay Safe with 8. And it's using intuition. It's paying close attention to the cues that I'm getting from a potential client. It's having a conversation with them, asking them questions, observe. There's a lot to observe to help me clarify whether a client is truly going to be a right match or not. And some professional cuddlers meet their clients in public only, or meet their clients in public to assess how they feel before they choose to have a session with them, or have a video chat. Like there's so many ways in which we can assess safety. And I want the clients to be aware. Let the customer beware. Pay attention to your spidey sense. Look to see if somebody has trained, has testimonials, has a social media presence over the course of years, for example, as ways to make sure that you are working with somebody who's working a practice that's ethical.
Well, I love how, I don't know, I guess your approach seems very empowering. You're not just telling people yes or no. You're not just telling them what to do or not to do. It's very much awareness oriented. So is that one of the baked in lessons that we can learn from this that you've mentioned? I think in other interviews you've talked about how there's so much that we can gain life lesson wise from the idea of professional touch.
Yes, we do an activity called the ask and wait method. And we can do that when we work one-on-one with clients if need be. We can do it in like group events. And that is where a person finds their body autonomy again, where they rediscover what their body is a yes to and a no to. As a woman, I've been taught to override my own sense of what I'm a yes to or no to sort of get by, to get along. And so I've received a lot of unwanted touch, as many people do across the gender spectrum. But by slowing down the conversation and not like, okay, let's just grab the person because I feel awkward. Instead, it's like, let's embrace the awkward and slow down asking, this is what I want, being vulnerable about desire. I'd love to hug you. Is that okay? Rather than putting my arms out like, I'd love to hug you. Is that okay? And pressure, like the pressure of leaning towards the person, putting my arms out. That's a hard thing to say no to. But we train professional cuddlers and people who are come to events that we used to have, how to accept a no to touch, how to ask, how to keep a body language neutral, and how to receive a no with grace and even gratitude. This can build trust between people. If I say, can I have a hug? And the other person's like, no, it wouldn't be good for me right now. Do you know why sometimes a hug isn't good for somebody right now? It's because they're trying to hold it together and they don't want to cry in public. Or they've just had a surgery and they don't want to get their shoulder, they don't want to feel any pressure on their shoulder. Or many, many other reasons. But it helps for a person to strengthen their capacity to receive a no and to give a no. So we practice that kind of stuff. And I think these are life lessons that can serve us all.
I think you just listed a gold mine of life lessons. I'm going to put those all together in a little Cliff Notes version email the week that our episode comes out. So that way we can all remember those, because those are gold, Jean. I love those. So as we wrap up, would you share where people can find you if they want a cuddle session, and also if they're interested in maybe looking into becoming a professional cuddler as like a side hustle?
Absolutely. So you can go to cuddlesanctuary.com and there are free lessons and even free webinars about learning this work, what this work is all about. You can find me on YouTube, Cuddle Sanctuary, also known as Cuddle Queen Jean, with lots of free content where you can learn a lot simply from listening and watching and absorbing all of it. Lots of eye contact and stuff, fun stuff there. But also, I have a certification program that's starting soon. And it's coming close to having to close the application period. So if folks are feeling jazzed about this and want me as a teacher, they can go to cuddlesanctuary.com and click on training.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you again. This was wonderful.
I loved it. It was so great talking to you.
Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. I hope to see you next week too. I talk with the most interesting people that you've probably never heard of. Most of them are paradoxical and bring an opportunity for you to grow as a person. So if you like bright, meaningful entertainment, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications.